remember kids used to say, you half caste, quarter caste, and I come home, I'd be like, Mum, they keep calling me half caste and quarter caste. She's like, what do you mean? You're none of those. You're dual heritage, which means one of many, right? And so she had a beautiful way of making it understand how whole we were with all the white and of all the black and all the, you know, the heritage that we had within us. And really conscious about us understanding that, you know, we originate from Africa, you know, and that this was really important that we understood our ancestral history of, you know, all the beautiful Egyptian history that is ours, that before all of this history that we've been taught, we were actually kings and queens, you know, powerful black people.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another podcast episode here at Beyoutiful UK. I'm your host Renée, and today I am joined with the lovely, beautiful sisters, Grace and Sula Graham. How are you guys today?
Really good, thank you.
It's lovely to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
I'm so excited to speak to you guys. Honestly, you guys have so much experience in what you do, and also just wisdom from the things that you guys have been involved in. So I know this will definitely be an insightful podcast for everyone watching and listening in. So I'll tell you a bit about my guests here today. So Grace is an entrepreneur. She's also a founder of Work Spa, which you guys may have seen maybe on Instagram. You may have heard about it through BBC as well. And she's also one of London's, let me get this right, most influential women. 2019. That's amazing, guys, honestly. And you're also a Princess Trust ambassador as well. And then moving on to your sister, Sula, you are someone who's kind of been in very senior positions in education, not only just in the UK, but also abroad. I know you'll talk about your experience working in South Korea. And you also you were the deputy head, I think, whilst you're abroad as well. And you also are a voice of activism, and you're also the project manager for Holla. Is that correct? Yeah. So as you can see, both of the sisters have a lot going on in their lives, and there'll be a lot of inspiration from our conversation today. But as I've obviously mentioned, you both are siblings. So I think the first question I'd ask you is, what was it like growing up, just going back in time, I guess, in London as teenagers or young females in the UK?
Yeah, I think that, you know, we were incredibly fortunate. We grew up in Hackney, and at the time it was a really deprived area, high gun crime rate. But we were really lucky to be brought up by a really kind of strong activist, you could say our mother was. And so she always really installed in us kind of the ability to kind of stand up for ourselves and for other people. So we were really lucky, even though we grew up in quite a rough area, I would say. She taught us so much about, you know, kind of strong women like Maya Angelou, and, you know, she took us on marches from a young age. You know, she was a huge part of a lot of when all the civil rights and all stuff was going on. We were, you know, she was a huge part of all of that. So, so we saw a lot from a young age. A lot. And we were really she was very conscious. So we were raised to be really aware of what was going on in the world, you know,
which is really important as well.
Yeah, and I think just another point to make about that, we're mixed race or dual heritage. Our mum is white and our dad was Jamaican, so it's even more of an important thing to make a point of. As a white mum, she knew she was having mixed race black children, and she made a conscious effort to make sure she learnt herself and taught herself about like black history, and taught us about black history, and taught us about being beautiful, that we are beautiful. Society may not see it, but you are. And I think a lot more, that's not common. I don't think within mixed race relationships, or it isn't as common that, you know, the white part of that relationship, or, you know, family member is, you know, as much of an ally. So we were very lucky to have that. And I think it grounded us, because growing up in Hackney was, I mean, where do you even start? And I won't go into it fully, but, you know, as I've got older and I do more of my own self-work now, and you reflect on your past, a lot of it wasn't okay, what we saw. We've lost friends. You know, it was one of the worst places to live in the whole of the UK at the time. You know, the gun crime, it was called the Murder Mile. So we saw, you become desensitized, but it was a lot, you know, and as young women going through it, was a lot. But I think another key point that I think is really important that people don't talk about within areas that are seen as the ghetto or rough or deprived, there's a real sense of community in those areas that we always had. And I know how blessed we were to grow up in Hackney because it was so diverse.
Yeah.
Even going back 30 plus years, it was like I had an Asian friend, Chinese friend, black, white, everything. And I just thought that was normal.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I came out of London and went to uni that I realised it isn't normal. The rest of the UK isn't this open-minded. And so there was lots of good and bad on both sides. But I think it's really put us in good stead for where we are today.
Yeah, definitely. And she had a really interesting way of, you know, sometimes when we go to school, I remember kids used to say, you half caste, quarter caste, and I come home, I'd be like, Mum, they keep calling me half caste and quarter caste. She's like, what do you mean? You're none of those. You're dual heritage, which means one of many, right? So she had a beautiful way of making it understand how whole we were with all the white and of all the black and all the, you know, the heritage that we had within us. And really conscious about us understanding that, you know, we originate from Africa, you know, and that this was really important, that we understood our ancestral history of, you know, all the beautiful Egyptian history that is ours, that before all of this history that we've been taught, we were actually kings and queens, you know, powerful black people. And that was a really important thing for us to understand. And I think, as Sula mentioned, incredible that I can say today that I learned black history from a white woman. So I think, you know, that is something that I'll continue to do when I have my own children. That they understand where they came from. I think it's really important.
It's powerful. I feel goosebumps hearing your story, because it shows how important I think the early stages of a child's life is as well, in dictating their views and opinions, not just of themselves, but the world around them.
Exactly.
And when it's instilled well, should I say, is the best word I'd use, by your parents or by whoever's bringing you up, you can literally see from the adults that they've kind of created how much it can really, it just shows how level-headed you guys are. It's really, really beautiful to see, honestly.
Thank you.
And just moving on from that slightly, I guess, you spoke about your mom and how much she empowered you guys from a young age. How would you say your self-love journey developed, I guess, from maybe teenage years into adulthood? Because I know a lot changes and relationships come in, or school, you know, can sometimes affect that. So what are you guys' thoughts on that?
I think for me, my self-love journey only started recently. I think what our parents gave us, so also to mention our dad, he was from Jamaica. He passed when we were 18, but he was from Jamaica, and he was a Rastafarian, like a proper Rasta, like dreads down his back, wore red, gold and green scarf. Like, so we had it on both sides, although he wasn't in our lives as much and was sick for a lot of our lives, but he always installed, he was a proud black man. And my mum learned a lot from him, and they both taught each other a lot, but they both had they both were really stood in that power of, you know, blackness, or, you know, had their children being black. So the self-love definitely is a child in terms of, you are beautiful, you're black, this is your history, don't let anyone tell you anything. I think that was installed with us from young. So I think we've always had that regardless, and that strive to, you know, move forward. In terms of maybe like my own self-love or working on myself, I think that's something that for me has come in like the last 5 years. So I've always had a confidence. I've always had I thought self-love was like how successful you are. So I've always been really successful. I've always done really well. But I went through a lot of situations that realised that actually I didn't have self-love, negative relationships, negative friendships and things like that I had to go through really hard times to be like, oh, why is this pattern repeating? Why is this happening? And then find out what I can do to fix it. And so I think I've always had an element of self-love, but the actual doing the real work for me probably only started about 5 years ago, after bad things happening that made me realise I needed to fix those things.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think I agree with my sister, really. You know, as she said, you know, we had that deep kind of grounding and rooting from our parents, but growing up in a difficult area, I lost my partner to gun crime. You know, our father had Parkinson's disease for most of our lives. So still as a young child, while we were taught so many things, there was still this real kind of lack and desire for a well father. And so what I did as I, you know, was in my teenage years, I searched outside of myself to find a father figure, or, you know, to replace the things that I felt that I was lacking. And that, you know, ultimately was quite a challenge, because it led me into quite challenging relationships with men that weren't that healthy. And what I later on realised is that, you know, I was trying to fill a void ultimately, I think, which many of us are trying to do. And I came to a place where I realised that in order to kind of find peace and love, I had to do that internal work. And I think that's taken me a lifetime. Like, it takes, and it will take
and it will take forever. It's a job, everyday
it's
job.
a daily practice, reminding ourselves that we love ourselves. And really, I think love for me has come from a place of being still. You know, the more still I am, the more I connect with my higher power, the more I find serenity and peace, and understanding that external things will never make me happy. And while it's fine to have a nice car, you know, nice clothes, we're human, right? But the spirit part of us, ourselves, ultimately doesn't need all of that, and it's all about love. So you know, we try our best now to kind of practice,
make it a daily practice,
and understand. And I think because we've lost both of our parents, you know, for us, that's been a huge challenge. But there's also something, you know, about kind of when you do these things, you understand and have much more value for the things that you do have, the small things that you have. And I think that that's taught us, you know, our relationship is incredible, because we're much more conscious of you know.
That's a key point. I just thought about when you were saying we've actually been through hell. There's no point in sugarcoating that. Like, we've been through traumas most people wouldn't see in a lifetime. And I think people, because we maybe look like we're well put together, or we're successful, or they don't realise how much work it takes to still be okay and not be crazy, or not like let it all fall apart. We lost our dad at 18. We recently lost our mum a year and a half ago. Our aunt died 2 years before then. I lost an ex-partner, Grace did. You know, we've been through a lot of trauma, and loss, and, you know, and I think I wouldn't wish any of those things on anyone, but when you go through them, you go one way or the other. You either go a way where it destroys your life, and I don't blame anyone that it does, or you say, I actually have to do everything I can to make sure life is going to be okay. But that comes with practice and work every day. And for me, where I've got to, I'm like, I've had so much trauma in my life and so much loss. I cannot afford for another day of my life to be bad, because what's the point? Why would I have any more bad? So that's when I was like, well, I need to consciously manifest, make these things good, and cut out anything in my life that is negative. Because why would I allow anyone negative around me, or anyone, when I've been through so much pain? Why am I going to allow someone else to add pain to my life when we've had so much loss and trauma? But we've had to go through all of these bad things to get here to be able to speak about it like this.
Yeah, exactly.
No, definitely. And I think that's the thing about experiences at the time. They're traumatic, or things which you kind of wish whilst you're going through it, why do I have to, or why did this have to happen to me? But when you look back, nothing beats the feeling of, goodness me, like, look how far I've come from having to go through you know, hell, you would say, to be honest. Not to take away the pain or grief that you would have experienced. You guys have touched on a lot. Again, so many things to take from what you've said. And I think something that stood out for me from both of your stories, I guess, with self-love, is that, one, it's an ongoing thing. And two, just how I almost think the older you get, you're more aware that you actually need to practice it. Because you said within the past 5 years, and you were mentioning it's a journey. So there's no, I'm now at the point where I've arrived. So I think it's kind of encouraging for people maybe listening that self-love, it just doesn't
just
happen
come
like that.
And you have to work, you actually have to work on it. It's
honestly,
a daily thing. Like anything else, you got to work on exercise, or your friendships or relationships or work. You have to do every day. And like, I've learnt a lesson sometimes of when it's got really good, I thought I've got really far, that's when I stop. Because I'm good, I've arrived. And then something crashes again, or something happens, and then what I've learnt from that is I have to do it for the rest of my life. And of course it will get better, and it's getting better, and things are falling into place. But it's that, in the same way we eat every day, is the same way that we should practice spirituality or self-love or care, whatever. I think it should be the same as breathing and eating.
So important. I agree. I think I've got into the trap of, okay, I'll do a few face masks and watch my favorite program and then I'll be fine. But the following day you might wake up the same. So it has to be more than just, I'm going to do all this today and I'll be okay. It has to be an ongoing thing. So
exactly.
I definitely agree with you guys on that. So you guys touched slightly on, well, I say slightly, we know a bit about the fact that you guys are entrepreneurs and you also worked in the education system. These are quite demanding roles. How did you guys work and manage your mental health at the same time as working in such demanding positions? We'll start with yourself, Grace.
Yeah, I think that's a hard one. I mean, my business is all about well-being.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time I was really stressed out running my business. So, but you have to practice what you preach, right, ultimately. So, you know, my business delivers a range of holistic services to corporations, ranging from mindfulness sessions, yoga, etc. And it's all about kind of the holistic and really supporting employees with mind and body and to just help them kind of be at ease while at work.
Yeah.
So I do those practices. I meditate most mornings and I do a bit of yoga. So, yeah, but it took me time to get that balance. And when you're running your own business, ultimately you are wearing a lot of hats. So you do have to do so many of the different roles. So it can be a challenge, you know. But yeah, I think what we kind of teach within the company to our employees is just taking a few moments throughout the day just to be able to breathe, you know, just to kind of sit and catch your breath and just some awareness around how you're feeling, really. So I try doing the same for myself as well. Yeah.
And again, I guess it's one of those things, it takes time and
exactly
things can offset the process, but you can come back to, you know, being mindful and practicing those things. And yourself, Sula?
I think, again, I'm a person that has to learn hard to change.
Yeah.
Or feel fit, you know, I didn't manage my stress for years.
Really?
At all. I managed it in the wrong way.
Okay.
I taught in inner city schools in London for about 10 years.
Yeah.
Worked my way up to an assistant head teacher and a teaching consultant, like leadership and management. And I wasn't doing, I didn't manage. I was existing, if I'm honest with you, you know. I was doing really well in my career, but I wasn't happy in my personal life. But that was due to many things.
Yeah.
But I was stressed all of the time and it's really took its toll on my health and I got quite ill actually because of it. So it manifested into like being quite ill.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it was because I wasn't managing stress because I didn't even know how to, if that made sense. And so what happened was I just got so sick and so frustrated that I left. So maybe the answer to that is a part of how to manage stress is to not have it. To try and minimise it, which sounds easier said than done, but I also don't think we realise that we can actually not have it in our lives. For so long I stayed in education because I was like, well, I'm not going to get another job. No one else will take me. You know, as a woman of colour, it's hard enough anyway to be in the positions I had to work doubly hard to get to where I was. And as soon as I became senior, I was one of the only black women in most of the spaces I've ever been in, or mixed race woman or whatever you want to call it. So, it's you know, we get stuck in, we can't do this, we can't do that. Yes, I could have left education because I've done it now and I'm successful in other areas. So sometimes we do need to eliminate the stress. I think people think they need to have the stress in their life, and you don't always need to. You know, you can find other roles or other things, or just take negative people out of your life, come out of a negative relationship, practice self-care. But so I've had to learn the hard way, basically. I think, and then. Again, I left education in the UK, and then I moved to South Korea for 2 years, which wasn't planned. It came out of the blue to me. I was actually planning to go to Dubai, but it's a whole other story. And South Korea was the best experience ever in hindsight now, but absolutely horrendous in terms of racism.
Wow.
Like the worst racism I've ever faced in my life. And in that, but also extremely stressful because in South Korea, they sleep 4 hours a night. They work 6-7 days a week. They are highly successful people, but that comes at a cost. So when I got there, I was expected to work like that. And sometimes I do 2 weeks in a row, no break. Like the stress was, I went abroad to like not have stress. Yeah. And it was actually as stressful or more than.
Goodness me.
So again, I wouldn't say it was my fault. I didn't cause it, but like I had to learn the hard way then.
Yeah.
But I had a lot of therapy while I was there, which helped.
Okay.
which I also think is another really important self-care
important.
strategy. You can do all the affirmations in the world or all the meditation, which I really believe in, but if you're not healing the trauma, you know, you've got to be doing, that needs to be healed.
Yeah.
And then I realised, actually, being in the education system and the way the education system has gone, which is so far the wrong way, it's not for me. It's too stressful. I can't be in it. For me to have a more peaceful life, I have to leave. So that was the way that I stopped having the stress, is I had to leave it altogether after 14 years of being in it.
Wow. And that's powerful in itself, because a lot of us stay in situations because of the fact that you've always been there. You know, you don't question it because this is how I've always lived, or I've always been in this type of sector. Why would I go somewhere else? So that, again, hopefully is something for someone out there. You don't have to.
Best thing I ever did was leave. So.
Yeah. And you've both shown that also. The idea of stress, it doesn't have to come with necessarily, wanting to be successful or wanting to maybe, pursue a certain type of career. You can still try and lower that and prevent that by whether it's eliminating certain people, certain things in your life. And I guess you might have experienced that, or some of the people who you worked with, your clients, might have experienced having to get rid of things in order to find that inner peace. Did you have any experiences of that with Work Spa? Or?
I think kind of more off the back of what Sula was saying, kind of what you're saying, this like knowing when to let things go, I think is like really key, you know. We can hold on to things so tightly in fear, and ultimately that causes us more pain and more stress. So I think is a really empowering thing to do, to say, actually, this isn't for me anymore. This doesn't feel right. And I think all of that comes with understanding more of yourself, you know. But also, importantly, what Sula was saying about therapy. So that's something I've done for most of my life. And I think that this most simplest thing, like what we're doing now, is to talk, right? To talk about it. A lot of us, especially in, I think, Western society, it's this culture of just tough it out, especially with work. You leave your stuff at home and you come to work. And one of the reasons why I set up my business was that I went through some really challenging times throughout my education and throughout when I was working as a teacher. And there was no support in the working environments that I was in. And so it was really challenging to deal with all the stuff I was dealing with and kind of cut that off and come to work and teach. And so for me, ultimately what I wanted to do was cultivate working environments where people could be held, where they could feel safe. But yeah, my therapy throughout my life has definitely been like a huge kind of helping, kind of transitioning, evolving, growing as an individual. So I think that's like really important. If anybody's struggling, you know, find somebody that you feel safe to speak with and just tell them what's going on. I think it's really important.
Sure. Definitely. I would agree with you. And I think I'm glad therapy is kind of coming out as something which people are more comfortable to do, maybe in the past few years or so.
Sure.
But let's go back, Sula, I guess, to the education side of things. And I know you also were in education. But what would you say were the similarities or differences with working in inner city UK schools to then being in South Korea, working in schools there, also in both senior positions? But what were the differences?
Similarities, being the only woman of colour in the senior team, pretty much. Having to really fight for who I was, even in inner city London as a woman of colour, or fight for things I believed in, like black history, black education, all of those things. Obviously 10 times harder to fight for it in South Korea.
Can imagine.
But, you know, it's always something that's been at the forefront of what I do. So that was similar. The differences how kids are in those two parts of the world. I've never in my life dealt with anything like it in South Korea, with the way that the parents were. Really? In terms of like, well, they're paying a very large sum of money for their children to go to that school. I was teaching the elite of South Korea, the 1%, like parents of millionaires and billionaires, versus inner city London, where kids are in gangs and kids are, you know, have a not very easy life. So you had kids that were there was neglect on both sides, or issues for both sets of kids. But in South Korea, it was that we were pushing them too hard. They were sleeping 4 hours a night. They were working to get into Oxford and Cambridge, but their mental health was horrendous because that's not normal for teenagers. And then in...
what was the age, sorry?
So it was 11 up to 18.
Wow.
And then in London, again, mental health was really bad for a lot of these kids, but that was actually because of what they were seeing outside of school, which was making it hard for them to learn. I wouldn't say they were any less intelligent. I think people have a perception that they weren't. They were the most beautiful, wonderful children, but they were dealing with so many things that it's not normal for a lot of children to deal with. Actually, school was a safe space for quite a lot of them, but they would struggle to get them engaged. So you had really engaged kids to engage, working too hard versus kids that would, didn't want to as much.
Too much going on.
Yeah, so that was the differences. What I learnt from it is kids are kids wherever you go in the world. I had this assumption I'd have no issues in South Korea. They'd all be really well behaved. They'd be great. There was as many issues. Teenagers are teenagers wherever you go in the world.
Yeah.
And I'm sure any parent will agree with that. They're a nightmare, but they're wonderful at the same time.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely the work ethic in South Korea is like nothing I've ever seen before, like I mentioned. So that was really full on. But children, to me, that's why I've always worked. I prefer working with children than adults. Adults are so hardened and set in their ways, and children have just such a beauty and an innocence about them.
Yeah.
And if they run the world, I think our world would be in a better place, honestly. So they get a lot of flack for the way that they can seem, but actually they're really brilliant. So I think that's what I learned, that it made me know I still always have to work with children in some way because they bring so much joy and fulfillment to me.
Yeah. And speaking of, tell us a bit more about Holla as well, because I know that links in.
Yeah, so I have been running a company called Holla, helping run a company called Holla for about a year now.
Yeah.
It's an incredible company. So it was set up by a football coach called Justin Cochrane. So he's football coach for Manchester United, under 21s. Sorry, Justin, if I didn't say your title properly, but he's very big in the game in what he does. He used to work for Tottenham and England.
Oh, wow.
And he's a black coach, which is a big deal as well. So he was from Enfield, grew up in Enfield, and he wanted to give back to his community. So he set up an organisation called Holla, and I now run it and help run it. And basically it's got two strands. So one of our strands, we have like a bank of inspirers, volunteers that are in all different fields, and they go in and do inspirational talks to kids in schools about their life stories or like aspirations or, a range of things to uplift those children in Enfield, because it's quite the kids face a lot in that borough of London. And then the other side that we do is we go in and deliver workshops.
Okay.
To kids around a subject, PHSE, which people might not know. It's like social health, emotional education.
Yeah.
And we do stuff around like mental health and well-being, teaching self-love.
So big now as well.
Yeah. So I've just started actually doing a unit where we teach affirmations and self-love to kids, which is wonderful. And then we, do stuff around risk, gangs, sex education and stuff like that. And then most recently we created, and it's actually become so successful and it's going so well, and I get excited about it because a lot of it was what my mum created and I revamped, is a positive black education unit.
Oh, wow.
So we teach a 5-part black education unit, and we created it because of what happened after George Floyd and what happened last year. It's always been needed, but we were like, right, we're not going to wait for the government to say we should do this. We're going to do it ourselves. So it's all about African kings and queens, black entrepreneurs, black inventors, role models, the black Egyptians, real black education, not just slavery and the civil rights movement. So that's one of our things we're really, really proud about. And we've been in quite a few schools in Enfield. We're now branching outside of. So it gives me that buzz of working with kids, but also not having to be in a school every day, and also to be able to, teach the right stuff around black education and promote positivity, within, the black community, because the government and the rest of, a lot of the world doesn't give us that or show us that. So we are having to do it ourselves. So I feel like I've arrived in terms of I'm doing something that is still me being a bit of a boss, which I like to be. Because that's in me. But giving back as well, working for a black-owned company, which is very important for me, and also doing something that we were brought up and something that is like really in honour of our mum. So that's what I'm doing at the moment, and I also do a little bit of consultancy myself on the side in diversity and inclusion, coaching and mentoring.
Oh, that's really good. Is that within education or across? It could be across the board.
So I'm trying in between. So actually, I'm going to be mentoring some young black girls soon. In like confidence building and stuff, and they work really in corporate. Good. So it's just helping them to. So in any fields, I'm trying to move more into corporate actually and do a mix of both. Yeah,
and it's so needed.
So needed.
A lot of my friends who are working in corporate roles, it's rough, honestly. regardless of the money you get, it's really
so
pressing on your
cutthroat.
mental health.
So cutthroat.
So that's
and there's a lot more space. I think there's a lot, companies are doing a lot of tick boxes at the moment. We do diversity inclusion, or we've done a survey, we've done a bit of training, but let's hire black people really quickly, we need to do that because so we look good, but they're not actually changing the culture of their workplaces so that their workplaces are supporting of black people. So a lot of these black people of colour are leaving. So I think it's about the awareness of it has to be a real cultural shift, not just let's do a tick box and employ a black person.
And it's not sustainable that way.
It's not sustainable at all.
It's not at all. I guess leading on from that slightly, both of you going back to what you guys experienced when you were younger and your experiences to do with self-love, how would you guys describe your spiritual journey? I know this is slightly different to what you guys mentioned before, but you guys have been mentioning things such as meditation, affirmations. To me, that sounds like quite spiritual practices. Would you guys consider yourself spiritual, or what does that look like to you guys?
I mean, I'd definitely say we're both very spiritual.
Has this always been the case? Or?
Yeah, I think so. As Sula mentioned, our dad was Rastafarian, which is very spiritual religion. Our mother was raised a strict Catholic, and she was really against it. So she said, I want you guys to grow up and experience the world, and then decide who you want to be in the world and what faith you want to follow. So. But we always, and especially in kind of Caribbean culture, you talk about your dreams, you talk about duppies, you talk about all of that stuff. So it's very natural to kind of have these conversations, which other cultures might see to them, or Western culture might seem a bit strange, but actually it's spirituality, to a degree, talking about kind of your experiences or otherworldly experiences, should we say. So that was very natural to us. And so I think for me, over the years, I started to read different books as well. So there's somebody that I love called Louise Hay, and she does positive affirmations and a lot of mirror work. So when I was going through some difficult times, I would do some mirror work. So look in the mirror and say, Grace, I love you, I really do, which isn't vain. You can do that. No. It's okay. And really, ultimately, what it's about is changing the way that we speak to ourselves, because we all have minds that can say quite negative things to us, and it's kind of changing our thought processes. And so by kind of constantly saying, I love you, or you are, incredible, or I'm empowered, it eventually gets you into a place where you're like, oh, actually, I do believe that. And you start to feel it, and then you start to kind of act in it. So Louise Hay really helped me on that journey of kind of self-love. And then we, like Maya Angelou is another person. And I love some of her mum. My mum used to read us her books and got really into her. And she's just an incredible woman. So kind of listening to other people that had overcome adversity and how they did things, and Oprah is another one of my favourites. For me, it was really important to hear stories of the other women and how they overcame adversity to kind of give me faith that I could have the same. And then I think your faith grows, especially when you go through difficult things in life and you overcome them. It would be kind of egotistical to believe that you do that yourself. So 100%. There's something much greater at work, and and that has grown my faith, and sometimes I think we have to be knocked down several times until we can ultimately find out who we are at our core. And so while it's been challenging for us to go through difficult things, there's also a gratitude for that, because it refines you as an individual. And so I have a strong faith in what I call a higher power, something that's much greater than me, that has always got my back, you know? And so I have discussions with my higher power when I'm in a meditative state, every day. And so that's really helped me. So you could say I'm spiritual. So I think spirituality.
You can literally see it glowing off both of you.
Spirituality is our thing, and it's our saviour, and I'm very grateful to my higher power for where I am today.
No, honestly, and I guess, like you said, from the things you've experienced, that makes a massive difference on how much fortitude you have by the time you're, years down the line or experiencing something similar.
100%.
Definitely. And yourself, Sula, how
I think I came to it quite. I think, again, we've had the same upbringing, we've had the same beliefs installed in us. I think I came to spirituality, or classing myself as a spiritualist, a bit later than Grace, or in a different way. I've always had faith. I've always believed in God or a higher power, but where I am now in my practice, I took just a different route, But I'd say I used to teach religious education. I would say as I grew up, I was quite atheist, or thought I was, because mum was quite like that. Not that she wasn't spiritual, but because of her negative experience of religion, she was like, there is no God, but she was actually really spiritual and psychic and all of these things, really. So I was like, oh, I can't believe in it. But then Dad would be reading a Bible every day. So I was like, which one do I do? I don't know what I should do. But I always found it so interesting. I love to like research and learn. I'm like, my family was like, take the mick at me, oh, she's on the Google again, researching how that happened. But I've always been quite like that, had a thirst for knowledge in that way. So I started teaching religious education, loved it at school just because it was interesting. And I was like, it's like mystical and magic and wow. And so I first started kind of looking at Islam and Christianity and would I convert? And I nearly converted to Islam when I was about 16 because I was really intrigued in it. And a friend of mine had converted when he came out of jail. But then it just didn't resonate fully, although I have a lot of respect for Christianity and Islam and take a lot still from those religions. And then after that, I went through a lot of traumatic experiences that I think brought me to a place of, and my sister would do a lot of affirmations and tell me about the stuff she's doing because of stuff that had happened to her. And so she was like, you know, I do this and I've tried that. And again, Oprah, Alanya Van Zant, I think I said her name right, but she's my hero.
I binged some of her videos.
Oh my God, I'm obsessed. She's crazy and wonderful and amazing and just love her. So again, started doing research, started practicing, and I felt like an absolute nutter when I first did it. Like, I love you, you're, you know, but it just felt, saying it in the mirror. But I actually had a lot of, I didn't realise how negative my self-talk on myself, I didn't realise how much lack of self-love I had. When I started with my therapist working out the way I spoke to myself, it was shocking, but I just thought it was normal. So I really had to just focus on that first, changing that around and believing that I love myself, because I'd say it, but I didn't believe it. So through a lot of hard things happening, I started to practice all of these things, I'd say about 5 years ago, just before I left the country to go to South Korea. I'd also lost my ex-partner at the time, so that was a real shock. And part of the reason why I left is I just wanted to get away from everything, and I'd had some other things happen. And it just, my whole world had basically been turned upside down, and I felt like I'd been stripped bare and I had to start again. I went to South Korea thinking I'm getting away from London and all the drama and all the stress. I was actually running away from myself. And I ended up with myself on the quietest island in the world, and the noise, I couldn't drown it out. And it forced me to deal with my demons and forced me to start working on myself and loving myself. And from that moment onwards, I've continued to practice meditation, self-love, you know, have therapy, self-care. Doing it a lot better in the last couple of years, but I'd say it fully started then. So I'd say I'd class myself as a spiritualist if you would ask what my faith is. I believe in a higher power, I believe in God. Just don't strictly follow certain books.
No, it's really interesting. And to be honest, I feel like there's a common theme with when you experience something, whether shocking, traumatic, hardship in life, somehow there's beauty that comes from it. And again, emphasis on at the time, you do not feel like this. There is no way you feel like that at the time. But looking back and you guys sharing your experiences with such a positive outlook now, it's empowering, and it's also very encouraging, because there could be people literally going through the worst time of their life listening in, and you guys are here saying, I've been there, done that, experienced that, and you know, this is what's come from it. It's so important to embrace it as well when it comes, and not to run away from it. But I guess running away actually helps. Because you were alone, you're like, hey, no, I actually need to.
So sometimes you're forced, like I said, I think I learned the hard way. Sometimes you're forced. Some people listen straight away and they do the things. But I listen a lot quicker now. I'm like, oh, universe, that's what you're teaching me. Right, we're not going to let this get worse. Let me fix it. But I had to go through a lot to get to that place.
And leading on from that, I guess, in spiritualism or just different religious practices, there's a lot of talk to do with purpose and meaning in life. What would you guys say to maybe someone who's a bit stuck with, whether it's career-wise, because you've both taught in education, or just purpose, if they're just stuck, like, why am I here, or I'm not sure what to do, what advice would you give a young person or even an adult listening in on that?
I think I would say you need to find something that you care about and believe in. One of the things I've learnt the most in terms of career and education, my goal was to help young kids, originally young black boys. That's why I became a teacher, because young black men go into primary school at the highest achieving and they leave GCSE at the lowest.
Wow.
So it isn't nothing to do with their parents and their upbringing, like the media will lead you to believe it's institutionalised racism most of the time, and what else is going on in police, etc. I will come back round to what you asked, but just that was my key reason of going into education. But another part of it was to just be career successful, etc. And I think I lost my way a bit. And I think to anyone that has lost their way, make sure you do something you're passionate about and you believe in. And that is easier said than done. Because not everyone can. Some people have just got to pay the bills. But if you're starting, you need to. We spend most of our day at work, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, sometimes, or not when you enjoy your job. But, we spend more time at work than we do with our friends and our family, right? If you are waking up every day and going to do something you hate, that is so many hours of your day doing something you don't enjoy. So it's about finding your passion and what you love and believe in and trying to turn that into a job. Then you're not working every day. So I think that would be a really key piece of advice to someone that's restarting or starting out again. Do something that you're passionate about. Or if not, another key thing I've learned, if you are in like a job where you just got to pay the bills, make sure you have passions, or you are giving back, or you are doing something that fulfills you inside.
Like a project
or something, or just like little bits of happiness for you at the end of the day, or and then I think the other thing is like just start doing something that is about you. Start by saying I love you. Start by reading Alanya, or there's so much self-help out there, Everywhere. Start by like just doing something little, because it will all start to fall into place. And we are a perfect example of you can get through anything, because we've really been through it and we're still here. And believe me, it hasn't been easy at all. But if we can, like you can get through it. It's possible, but you just need to start. Yeah,
definitely.
I think you said it so well. I don't really know what's left for me to say. Exactly what Sula said. I think another thing that's really important, if you believe in affirmations and the universe, it's really important to write things down. So you might be stuck in a real dead-end job, or you're not sure, where your career is going, but inside, your gut or your spirit will be telling you what it is that you want to do. If you can listen to that closely enough and write that down, so I write down who I want to become, and I have 2 pages and I read it every other day. So, I'm going to be standing on stages speaking across the world. So, I will repeat this every day, because what we put out there, we eventually get back. 100%. God's listening, your higher power's listening. So it's small actions like that can also make a huge change. And to remind yourself that while the situation that you're in right now isn't quite what you would like, there's always something greater that's awaiting you. So, so I think writing down and constantly affirming is also key.
So true. And that's basically the bedrock as well of I Am Beautiful. We definitely heavily focus on the affirmations and looking at yourself and telling yourself you are beautiful, not waiting for someone else to tell you. And you guys have literally proven that you have to do the work as well. I think sometimes we rely on, whether it's a relationship, a friendship, whatever outwardly, it is.
And actually it's all within.
Yeah, definitely. I feel very full with just inspiration, lovely. How my week's now going to go, because I'm like, okay, wonderful. I need to start this, and it's one of those conversations where you kind of look back and it's like, when you guys are speaking, I don't know how other people are going to experience this podcast, but there's different things that are just popping up in my mind, like, okay, that's actually good advice for this, which is what I'm going through, or that's good advice for that. So I've really thoroughly enjoyed speaking to you guys.
Love talking with you. It's
honestly,
amazing.
And I hope this isn't the end as well. Speaking with you guys. What's upcoming, I guess, would you say, for the both of you? And how can we find your socials and get in contact?
So for me, continuing to grow Holla. We want to grow. Focus on getting more funding so that we can provide this throughout London. It's really important, amazing. Especially the black education, well, all of it, but the black education stuff, because it's so lacking. And then also me continuing to build my consultancy is key. My social's private, so I don't really promote it yet, but have a look at Holla UK. And then I'm sure if when my business stuff comes, I can put it up or we can promote it. But that's what's coming up in the future for me, just growing on that and continuing the self-love.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And Grace.
And Work Spa. So, you know, we're kind of relaunching again in the new year, which is fantastic. So we'll be back supporting our clients in offices across the UK. And what else? And, you know, I just have a passion for kind of speaking and, you know, helping women to kind of overcome adversity. So that's kind of the next chapter where I'll be kind of doing some talks and stuff in the future.
Really good. So, and if we wanted to, I guess Work Spa, we can get in contact.
Work Spa, and then my personal page, Amazing Gracie. I'm very modest, but it's my favourite book actually. Is a book called Amazing Grace that my mum used to read to me, so that's why I
feel like I've heard of that
Gracie.
one. Yeah,
it's beautiful. About this beautiful young black girl. So you find me there or on Work Spa. Or LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. You can find me, Sula Graham.
Perfect. Thank you so much, guys. Like I said, I've really enjoyed this podcast.
We've really enjoyed talking to you.
It's been quite emotional for me. I'm not going to say why, but I've really, really enjoyed it, and it's definitely something which I'll remember this conversation 100%. And those of you listening in, I hope that you guys have enjoyed listening to another I'm Beautiful podcast with myself, Renee, and today we had Grace and Sula Graham.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for joining us on the I'm Beautiful UK's official YouTube channel. If you enjoyed what you just watched, don't forget to share it with your friends, your family, your teachers, your work colleagues. But remember to like, comment,